All right, what's up, you guys? We're live. So if you can hear me and if you can see me in the chat, pop in, let's pop in your favorite emoji, just for fun. So while I get all set up, oh no, maybe it's not gonna work. Oh, you know what? I need to turn this off. So, oh, there we go. Yeah, you can do it. All right, so let me just turn off, let me just get set up here. Whoa. All right, here we go. Okay, so we're going to be talking about population pyramids tonight. So I dropped a question in the poll for you guys about what is stressing you out about AP Human Geography. So also if you can take a minute to answer that. If it's something else that stresses you out about Human Geo, you can drop that in the chat and let me know, because what I'm doing this year is really trying to help students do well in Human Geography. I think this is a really awesome class and really doable, you know, like it's not the hardest of APs, but it can be really stressful, especially if it's your first. So I want to make sure that you have the resources, the tools, everything you need to do well. So if there's something that I can help you with, then I want to be able to do that. So, all right. Oh, you know what? Sorry, y'all. Give me a second. I just changed I just got to add this really quick. Okay, here we go. Application window. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so I highly recommend that you take some notes while you're listening to the session. Obviously, you don't have to. It's not mandatory. But the things I'm going to be telling you about are really useful when it comes to understanding population pyramids. And I'm going to also at the end do a sample FRQ. So how many of you guys have already written an FRQ? So maybe you could just drop in the chat. Like if you've already written one, you can say yes. If you haven't, then you could say no. Okay, so it looks like some of you guys have, some haven't. That's fine. You got plenty of time in the year. But we're going to do like a little bit of a practice one tonight, not writing it out, but just kind of showing you how it goes and what you should focus on. Okay, so population pyramids is what I'm focused on today. And this, my friends, this is part of Fiveable. So at Fiveable, we do live reviews just like this one, and we do them all year long to really help you pass your AP exams. So I'm Amanda Doamaral. I founded Fiveable. I'm a teacher. I taught AP Human Geography and AP World History. You can find me anywhere on the internet at Think Fiveable. Actually, by the way, our YouTube channel is like 10 subscribers away from hitting 1,000, which is super exciting. So if you guys want to subscribe to that, it is at Think Fiveable on YouTube. And all right, so some upcoming reviews. So today, population pyramids. Next week, we're going to talk about like population growth and decline, and specifically the DTM model, which is really important for the exam. And then the week after that, we'll get into migrations. And so it should be pretty much aligned to where you might be in class. But if you are studying something else, I know some teachers do this in different orders. You know, if there's something else you have questions about, feel free to drop it in the questions piece below so you can see where it says ask a question. You can write a question in there at any time, and you can upvote each other's questions, and I'll, you know, adjust to make sure that this is helpful for you. And so read for FRQs. Those are the free response questions that you'll be answering on the exam. So the AP Human Geography test is multiple choice, and then 3 free response questions. So it's a specific type of like short answer, and we'll kind of talk about how to do them. Okay, so let's talk about population. Start talking about population. So if you look at a map of the world like this, you can see this is showing, you know, with dots where people are in the world. So you can see how densely populated different parts of the world are. And a map like this is really useful for understanding population, because you can learn like what are the trends? Where do people live in the world, right? There's 7 billion people in the world. Where are they? So according to this map, they're pretty like there's some pretty common patterns here. First, you can see that there's way more people that live in India and in China, and that that piece of Asia and Indonesia than anywhere else in the world. Right? You can see it like India here looks like it's colored in, whereas the rest of the world has all these dots, right? It's just there's so many dots in India that there's just that many people. And so it's kind of interesting to look at this because you can see and think about like what are the trends that we're seeing, right? Based on this, most people live within sort of a band across the world that like not necessarily like right on the equator, but kind of close to it, right? That band right there, that comes up a couple times because of agriculture. That's where things grow really well. So there's a lot of people that live there. The other thing that you can see is that most people tend to live near water, right? Like on coasts or near some sort of water source. That makes sense, right? So trade is a lot easier when you live on the water. So you can definitely see a distribution pattern in terms of where people are in the world. And the reason why I'm getting into this first is because, to really understand population pyramids and like why you need them, you have to kind of look closely too at just in general, where are people in the world and why do they live there and what does that mean? So there's a couple of factors that come up. And this is some good stuff here that, if you're taking notes, this is a good thing to write down. So why do people live in different parts of the world, right? So we talked about a few of them based on that last map. One of them is natural resources. People tend to live in places where there are resources, right? And they don't live in places where there aren't. So based on this map, you can see like Northern Africa, that's a desert. That's the Saharan desert. And so there aren't that many people that live in the desert because there aren't that many resources for survival. All the like north up here, Canada, Siberia up there, there's people that live there, but there aren't a lot because it's cold, right? So people tend to live in climates that are, hospitable. You don't want to live in a place that's too hot like the desert or too cold like the tundra, right? Like the Arctic. Another thing that you can see here too, and you can even see like in the desert in Australia too, most people in Australia live on the coast of Australia. So that's part of the reason, that's one thing that you can keep in mind. Another reason of why people live where they live is socioeconomics. So if you don't know what socioeconomics are, this is a really important term for human geography. This is, your status in society based on social factors like gender, race, class, and then your economic opportunities. That's more likely class, but that's like how much money you have, how much money it costs to live in a place, right? So people live in places that have more opportunity, sometimes there's more people that live there. Another reason is political decisions, right? So people move based on politics. So in some cases, if there's like a war, people are going to move away from that region. If there is the like government decides to put some kind of military base somewhere, that will generate people will move there, right? And then the last thing is just accessibility, just like how do you get to places, right? More people are going to live, where you can easily have transportation than in like desolate areas, right? There's more opportunity, there's more places to work. So no matter what, wherever people live, the reason why population, we talk about this early in the year, is because there's a lot of implications for it. And I only put 3 up here. There's a lot. It kind of comes up in every single unit that you're going to talk about, right? So in terms of, culture and like where people live and what culture they have and what that means for the like environment there, like that plays a role. And so that's going to come up when you talk about culture. It comes up when you talk about infrastructure and services. Where people live, they're going to build things, right? And those things have implications. Same thing with resources. People live in places and they use up resources. They might harm their environment. And then lastly is politics. So like where people live affects things like voting and redistricting and, who's there, who's voting for people. So, these are a couple of the implications for population distribution. And, like just to go back to this map one more time, the fact that we have so many people in the world that live in this region has implications, right? It puts a lot of stress on those regions. It makes it so that, resources could be hard to come by. Infrastructure is affecting the, more things have to be built. And so that affects the environment. How do you govern 1 billion people? Like, that's not easy. So, that all those things have effects, and that's part of this whole debate. The part of this whole conversation is where do people live? Why do they live there? And what does it mean because they live there? All right. So again, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the question tab, and you can upvote each other's questions as well. You also can type anything you need to into the chat, and I'm watching all of it. Okay. So I'm going to keep going, and let's get into the population pyramid. So can you guys type a 1 in the chat if you have studied population pyramids already, and a 0 in the chat if you're not even sure what a population pyramids are? Cool. All right. So some of you guys have already studied them. Sweet. Some of you guys not yet. That's okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview here. And what I'm going to actually focus on the most is the ways that we can analyze population pyramids, because that's what it's going to ask you about on the exam. That's the hardest part, right? Like, you can memorize how to label one of these things, but what you really need to understand is how to use it and what you can learn from it. And that's what tends to kind of throw students off. So one of the ways that we can analyze populations is through population pyramids. It helps us to see who lives in a society. So you can have a population pyramid for any region. It could be a city, it could be a state, it could be a country, it could be the whole world. This is the population pyramid for the entire world. So just to give you a quick sense of like what's even going on here, there's a lot of pieces of data that it's telling us. All right, so it's telling us age. So it's breaking down the population by age. And so it's showing based on each line on the chart is showing you about how many people live are that age group, right? So up at the top, that's where you got old people. Up at the bottom, that's where you got kids. That's the children. You can also see gender on here as well. So you see how it's split from male and female. So, but just by looking at this, you can see that, there are less 80-year-olds than there are 3-year-olds in the entire world. Right. And there's implications for that. The other thing that it shows you is everyone in the middle here is economically active. So that means, or theoretically economically active, right? There's other reasons why someone might not work, but all the people at the bottom, kids, and all the people at the top, the oldest of our population, these two groups depend on everyone in the middle, everyone right in here. Right, these are the people who are taking care of the older generations and the younger generations. So these people, the more, if you have a society where there are more people at the top and at the bottom than there are working, that can be a problem. All right, so that's called dependency ratio. All right, let's just check really quick. Could you please repeat where the line about agriculture is? And how do we know if population pyramids are accurate? Okay, so the line where agriculture is, let me just go back really quick to this slide here. So agriculture tends to thrive like in this region here that's like, I forget the exact number, but it's a certain number of like maybe like 20, 30-ish degrees above the equator and 30 degrees below. So that like band across the world tends to be the best like place for agriculture. And if you actually map out the early societies, like early civilizations, like Egypt, Mesopotamia, all those early ones, almost all of them are in that band because that's where agriculture does the best. Okay. How do we know if the population pyramids are accurate? It's an interesting question. So, like any data set, it's good to question like, where does this data come from? I think, it depends on kind of where you get them. This one, all the ones I'm going to show you tonight, almost all the ones I'm going to show you are from populationpyramid.net, which is actually a really cool website that I'm going to put in the chat because I already pulled out a bunch of them that I'm going to show you tonight, and we're going to talk about them. But you can actually see, you can click on any country in the world and any time period. And so, remember that this is just showing you, it's just showing you data. It's just showing you like how many people there are. So it's not making any assumptions about those people. It's just showing you that. And then you can use this to make those assumptions. So the assumptions themselves could be incorrect. They could be correct. But the data is based on, census data. It's based on any type of like way that we can count people, right? So taxes, anything like that. So it's pretty, accurate. Okay. Done answering. All right. So boom, boom. Okay. So lots of information is coming from these pyramids, right? And I think it's easy enough to just kind of like know the basics of it, that the children at the bottom, it's showing you age, it's showing you how many people, and there's just sort of that axis in the middle that's at like 0. So each one is kind of jutting out on its own. So what can you actually learn from population pyramids? There's a lot of things that you can learn, and you definitely need to know what each of these terms are. So something I talked about last week with human geography is this class is very vocabulary heavy. So there are other APs that are very like skill heavy. Those would be like the histories, probably the math classes, right? Where you like really have to know how to do things. In human geography, and which is similar to like almost like psychology, it's vocabulary. Like the best thing you can do in studying for this class is to just straight up learn the vocab, right? Just learn it. You just got to kind of memorize some of this stuff and then apply it. So we're going to apply these things. Okay. So in terms of population pyramids, there's really like 5 things that I've highlighted here, and probably other things too that you can learn from population pyramids. One of those things is just the size of dependent populations. So that's what's called like a dependency ratio. That's what I talked about here. So if this section here, the people in the middle, the people that are working, if that is bigger than the older people and the younger people, that's good, right? They can keep those people, alive and healthy. If there are more dependents, that can be a stress on the population. So that it's showing you dependency ratio. You can see when a society has, a dependency ratio that is not equal. If there's more people to depend on. The second thing you can see is like birth rates and death rates. So as you look at population pyramids, this bottom piece here will show you birth rates, right? It's not going to necessarily show you like the number. It's not going to say like in the world, the birth rate is, and then some number, but you can see in relation to other ages and just a general, like if it's long, the birth rate is high. If it's short, the birth rate is small, right? So in the world, it's, this is the world, so it's kind of hard to like depict this one or a relative number, but birth rates are coming out of this bottom piece here, and death rates are coming out of this top piece here. So you can see like, just in general how long people live. I think that's what I had for the second. Oh, that's number 4. The third thing that you can see is the gender makeup in the society. So, obviously we've got male, we've got female, and I think it's always the males are on the left, the females are on the right. So you can see the gender makeup in a society. And sometimes, there's more males than females or more females than males, and in a particular age range. And you can attribute war, migrations, either of those things would affect that, right? So if you look at, even here, of 80-year-olds in the world, there are more women. That's probably just like a biological, women live longer. But in some countries, when you look at them, you can see that there are more females than males of a certain age range. And if you know the history, you know that there was a war that those people were like 20 years old for, right? And so more men died because they fought in the war. Therefore, today, there's more 80-year-old women. Or migrations. Migrants tend to be male. So if there's a period of migrations to a country, you're going to see more males in that country. Or if they're emigrating from the country, you're going to see more females there. So you can see the gender makeup and you can make assumptions about those. You can apply history. You can apply, just an understanding of like what happened to explain why. The other piece of it, okay, so life expectancy. So in this case, you can see that like the life expectancy in the world, right? Like, people live as old as in their 90s, like globally. And it can kind of show you like in less developed societies, the whole pyramid tends to be shorter because they're not living as long because of a lack of medicine, a lack of education, all kinds of different factors. So you can see that from population pyramids. And the last thing is that size of economically active populations, right? So in a society with more people in the middle, they're more economically active. That means that's good for the economy. That's good for, trade and growth. Okay, so there's basically 3 different shapes of population pyramids that all of them fit into. All right, so let me just make sure that goes away. So in terms of the 3 shapes, the first one is always like a triangle. This is for developing nations. So these are nations that most of the developing nations today are in Africa or in Asia, and sometimes in South America. And so these countries are like not fully industrialized. They're developing. They're what we call or have called before like third world countries. We don't really use that term anymore. We say developing. And these countries tend to have high birth rates, right? So that bottom base is long. You can see there's a lot of babies being born. The reason for that is because there's generally some sort of lack of birth control. And so people have a lot of children. And so the second thing is that they have generally low life expectancy. So it tends to be short, where, most people are not living super long. And then lastly is it's slow growth rates. Like the overall population of these countries is not growing all that fast. And that has to do with too many babies and a high infant mortality rate because of lack of medicine. So the fact that there's all these babies being born, but a lot of them are not surviving past infancy is affecting the population growth. The second type of population pyramid you can see is kind of a rectangle. So in this one, this is like developed countries. So an example here would be the US. The US population pyramid looks kind of similar to that. It's just kind of boxy. So in that type of society, there's low infant mortality, right? The birth rate isn't very high. It's pretty like stable. People are living much longer, but there's also like slow growth in that too. They're not growing super fast. And then the last one is sort of like inverted, right? So what in the last version, the problem is that you have way more older people than younger people. And so it's actually negative growth. Their population size is declining. It's because people are dying and not a lot are being born. And so in Japan, you see this where like there are too many there are way more people who are older than there are children. Okay. All right. So again, drop your questions in, hit the chat, if you have any questions about the 3 types of population pyramids. So I'm just going to show you to the 3 countries that I just talked about. So Namibia, this is the population pyramid for Namibia. Namibia has about 2.5 million people that live there, and this is how they break down. Right. So you can see it's, the life expectancy in Namibia is not that high. It's, it kind of trails off after 60, right? Like people live longer. Like it's not like everyone just dies, but generally there's just a pretty low life expectancy, and the birth rates are massive, right? Like this bottom base is huge. And then it, you look at this like jump, right? So like, where do all those children go, right? Like we don't have way less 5 to 9 year olds than we do 0 to 4. That's because of a high infant mortality rate. And then as they kind of go up, you can just kind of see the differences here. This is the US. So the US has a population of about 326 million people. And you can see here, it's more of the like rectangles, more boxy. the birth rates in the US, like the size of this line is pretty close to the size of, this line. We have a similar number of 65-year-olds as we do infants. So they're, and you can see here, look at the difference between this bottom piece here. The infant mortality rate in the US is not very high. So, you can see, whereas here, look at the difference between these two lines. Here, it doesn't change. These kids are staying alive more. Okay, so this one is Japan. So just like we talked about that inverted one, right? This inversion here. Here's where you can see the birth rates, and you can see how there's way more people who are older. And so that poses all new issues in the society, because how do all these people in the middle take care of the older populations? All right, let me just check. All right, so generally, how do you feel about population pyramids now? Just in general, we're going to look through a bunch of them right now and just kind of talk about analyzing them. So give me a 9. No, let's say a 0 through 5. So 0 would be I don't understand population pyramids at all. A 5 would be I totally get it. So in the chat, give me a 0 to a 5. Cool. So you guys are 4s and 5s, the 3, 4s and 5s. Sweet. So you're going to be in a great spot when you're asked about this on exams. So let's talk about analyzing them. This is where things can get tricky, and part of that is that you do need a little bit of historical knowledge to kind of understand this. It's also, I know that some teachers have started teaching population later in the year because so many of the other units give you the understanding you need to get to a place where you can analyze this. So let me show you how to do this. So the two questions that you should think about is what factors would affect the ages of a population, right? What are the factors that would affect a population from being older versus younger, and what factors affect the gender makeup of a population, right? So when you're analyzing these pyramids, that's what you're thinking about. Why are there people in this, country or this city that are these ages, and why are they these genders? So let's go through a few that are kind of fun, because they don't fit the exact mold of those 3 shapes that I showed you. There's something about these ones that are different. So let's see if we can figure it out. So this is Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor is in Michigan. So you can see, obviously, Ann Arbor has a huge population from 20 to 24 years old, way bigger than anyone else, right? So it and then also this line 15 to 19 is relatively big. Then this one is massive, and then it trails off. Why? Why do you think the population of Ann Arbor would have such a massive population? What would bring 20-year-olds to Ann Arbor? Nailed it. College town, right? So any city that's a college town that has a really high percentage of college students is going to have a population pyramid that looks like this, right? So you can see it's a college town. If it were a women's college town, then if you looked at Northampton, Massachusetts, where Smith College is, it would have more women in 20-year-olds. So Ann Arbor, college town. All right, what about this one? This is the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. UAE has a little over 9 million people that live there. And obviously this one it's literally off the charts. So what's going on here? Why do you think the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, would have, we've got, of the male population, it's massive over here, right? This is 25, between 25 and 45 and 50. In 25 and 50, there's so many men in the UAE. In terms of how many females there are, it's far less. So what is it about the UAE? So one guess was military. Military isn't necessarily for the UAE, but yeah, the Iris nailed it first, and Robert got in there too. So the answer here is migrant workers, right? So the UAE has a lot of economic opportunity in the Middle East. So there are a lot of migrants that go to the UAE to work, and whether or not they stay there, they don't, right? So like they come to work and then they don't necessarily stay, right? So you can see like after 50, they kind of drop off. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're dying. It just means they're not in that country anymore. So migrant workers. So one of the things we're going to talk about in a few weeks is migration, and migration tends to be male, right? So men tend to go and work, or sometimes they might bring family after, but for the most part, like that's a trend in migration. So, yeah, this is exactly why. There in Saudi Arabia too. If you look at that population pyramid, it looks a similar way, where they're like this just sort of like juts out for men. All right, let's look at another one. This is Germany. So the thing that's interesting about Germany is that you have, it's definitely like a more developed society, right? It kind of has that like, or at least it's developing towards that inverted pyramid, right? Where there's less of the birth rate is smaller here. But one of the things I thought was interesting about Germany is that there's quite a drop off up here, right? Like what about these people here? Like 75 to 79-year-olds are, there's quite a few, and then it drops. Where'd they go? And not only that, there's way more females than males, of these two bars. Far more women of this age range than men. Deaths because of World War II. Exactly. Right. So it's important that you know some history with human geography. And this is a good example. So knowing that World War II happened, about 80 years ago, and Germans would have been massively affected by World War II. So most of the people who died in World War II were men. Those are the people who were fighting on the front lines. So of these two populations here, yes, women live longer. That's a thing that's part of it. But a lot of these men died. They died young. They died when they were, 20. And so I bet if I looked at, let's just look at it. Let's go to populationpyramid.net. This is where I got them. So let's look. I think you can actually change the year. So if we did Germany, where is it? And then let's go back. You can go to whatever year you want. So let's go to Germany in like 1950. Germany in 1950. Yeah, look. See, you see this like massive gap here, right? So in 1950, 30-year-olds, that's who would have mostly fought in the war. You can see that like they're missing, right? Like there's a massive gap between before and after. And then you can kind of follow them along, right? So you can see them like kind of jumping up, and that's exactly what's happening, right? It's the same. That's the population that was affected by World War II. All right. This one is China. So what's interesting about this one is this subset right here, right? The 35 to 39-year-olds. Why would this be like that? Why is there, it's kind of tapered off here. Obviously, there's more people born here, or more people, of this age. But why does it jut in like that? 35 years ago, why would there be less 35-year-olds in China than 40-year-olds? And this one's not about a war, so I'll give you that hint. So China, we got over 1 billion people. What is the deal? Nailed it, right? So we've got one-child policy. So one of the things that you study when you look at populations is ways in which the government can affect population. Sometimes governments will encourage population growth. Sometimes governments will discourage population growth, right? So in China, what you have is the one-child policy was meant to discourage population growth, right? Everybody gets one kid, and then we'll have less, we won't grow as fast. So that was implemented here. So there were literally less people born because there was legally less people who were allowed to be born. So that's something that you could apply to China. I think I have, oh, that was it. All right, so let's take a look at this FRQ. So for some of you guys, you said that you've written an FRQ. Others said that you have not. This one was on the 2010 exam. So when you take the test in May, there will be 3 FRQs, and you have to write all 3 of them. Each one should take you like 25 minutes. So this one was on the test in 2010. It's useful to use practice questions that have been on the test before because they show you exactly like what you're going to see. So in this case, it's giving you 2, right? It's got country A, country B. It says the population pyramids above represent 2 countries at different stages of the demographic transition and economic development. You know what? Let's skip A because we didn't talk about the DTM today. The demographic transition model we will talk about, unless you guys have already studied it. Have you already studied the DTM? And if so, I mean, we can just go through it. So this one says explain. No, okay. So let's just look at B and C. This one says discuss one positive impact of each country's population structure on its economic development. So for country A, what is one positive impact of this population structure? Something that's good about this population. This one, it tends to be like, you know, you can see this is more of the like triangle. So this is a developing nation. So for this one, you have to think of like a positive impact. So I would say, you know, let's see. I mean, let's see what you guys have to say. So what would be some positive impacts of the population structure there? I'm just gonna look up. Give you guys a second to take a look at that. Okay. Okay, so one person said many workers available and they are young. Yeah, so the fact that there's like a lot of young people, right? So like obviously this country has a high birth rate, but the good thing about that is that you have a lot of young people, right? And young people can be innovative, they can be creative, and they can be good workers because they're young, they're healthy. So that's a good thing, right? Having young people. And then the adverse of that would be that you don't have a lot of old people, right? And that means that you don't have to have, you don't have the same problems that like Japan does. Japan has a lot of their elderly population is massive, so they have to figure out how to support them. In this country, they don't, right? So they're going to have more people. Yeah, so it's definitely developing. Let's see, young workforce, they have a large and young, yep. So the only can help older generations out. Yeah. So the only thing is that the infant mortality rate is super high in this country. So they would definitely have to find ways to curb that. One positive impact of this other one, of country B. So what's something good about country B? The way that it is structured, and you have to focus specifically on economic development. So with FRQs, it's really important that you pay close attention to the words in the question. So in terms of economic development, what's something positive about this population structure? Something positive. All right, male and female is fairly even. Yeah. So you just would have to make sure that you attach that to something economic. More adults to help take care of older and younger people. Yeah, right. The dependency ratio in this country is good. There's a lot of workers here, right? A lot of people. Yeah, exactly. Their workforce can support both the younger generations and the older ones. Exactly, right? There's a lot of people in that working age that will be able to support the older and younger generations. All right, let's get into negative impact. So for country A, what would be a negative impact of their population structure? So what is a negative of having that triangle, that a negative impact? And make sure that you attach it to economic development. Yeah. So definitely low life expectancy, right? And when people don't live as long, they are not economically active for as long, right? So like the longer people are living, the more work that they have, put into the society, and that's good for the economy. Fewer old people equals less experienced / skilled workers or managers. Oh yeah, that's a good point, right? So like there's not as many like older, not as much experience. Yeah, that's a good one. Lack of experience in running a nation, maybe not much savings. Yeah. Another thing you could talk about too is the infant mortality rate. The fact that there's a strain on resources for the younger generation. All right. And then lastly, for country B, what would be a negative for them? Country B. Yeah, fewer children. You could say too that right, so fewer children means that in the future there might be labor shortages, right? So as these kids grow up, there's less of them than there are current, members of that society, of that like age group, and so they might have a problem later on when it comes to filling jobs. There might not be enough people. Tough to fill the basic entry-level jobs. Yeah. So, all right. So in terms of like FRQs, just to give you like a quick rundown. So this is a good example. This is an example like we talked about. Like this was on the test, and the way that you answer these is it's honestly really straightforward. It's not meant to be an essay. It's not meant to be like a really long, drawn out answer. Like you really just have to kind of like cut to the chase and answer it. And we're gonna do a lot of practice FRQs as we go. Sometimes I'll pull up like a document and just kind of share that with you guys, so you can kind of write one together, and that's something we'll be able to practice. One of the things, like the way that these things are graded, the like rubrics kind of change depending on questions, but it's pretty much worth the number of points for how many things it's asking you to do. So in this one, A is asking you to do one thing, explain the demographic characteristics of each country. Oh, no, it's asking you to do two things, right? So you got to explain for both things, right? So part A is asking you to explain the demographic characteristics for country A and country B. So that's two things. Part B is asking you to do two things, right? Discuss one positive for A, one positive for B, and then in C, same thing. So this whole FRQ on the 2010 exam was worth 6 points. And it's pretty much like you either get the point or you don't, right? You never lose points on FRQs. Like they're not going to take anything away from you. So it's worth it to take a guess, to always try on these, because you got nothing to lose, right? So it's not like you write something down and then they're going to take points from you. They're just awarding points for things that you do correctly. And so the way that you would answer this is very straight to the point. So I would say to write, you end up writing like 2 to 3 sentences per like point that you're earning. And sometimes it's even like one sentence. It's really just like answer it. And so, you could answer like we just did part B and C. You could answer part B in I would say to write 2 sentences for this graph and 2 sentences for this graph, right? You know, one positive impact of country A is, what do we say? The, like more children will be a bigger workforce. And then you can kind of like give one more sentence to just sort of explain that. And then one positive thing for country B is blank, you know, and then explain it. So you could do part B in 4 sentences, part C in 4 sentences. So it's pretty straightforward. So we're going to do a bunch of examples of that. Do you guys have any other questions? And even if you are, you know, if like you're on a different unit right now, or you have a test coming up, or you have homework right now and you're not sure what to do with it, you can ask me anything about human geo and I am happy to help out. We definitely have some time left over, and so we can talk through any of those things. The other thing that I will mention really quick is the button there, the replays and future live sessions. Fiveable is expanding this year. Last year we helped there was like 500 students that studied with us. And I think we ended up, like, I did some math. We literally saved them over like $1 million in college credits. And if that sounds ridiculous, it's because the cost of college is insane. And so throughout the year, we're going to be doing live sessions every week, just like this. You know, sometimes explaining content, sometimes doing practice questions, practice multiple choice, answering all of your questions. And throughout the entire year, we can really make sure that you're not only doing really well in class, but also prepared for the exam in May. And in May, we're actually going to do like a lot more sessions. So like the week of the test, we do sessions every night, and those are like packed, right? Everyone's freaking out. So if you think about your future self and how much you might be freaking out then, one of the things that you can do is join Fiveable. In the month of September, our live reviews were all free. Going forward, it's $15 for the whole year. And that's our fall like early bird price, because you guys are super on top of it and you're here and it's September. So the price is actually going to increase throughout the year because more kids will need us to be teaching live sessions. So you can get in and lock down your whole year with AP Human Geography with Fiveable for $15. So way cheaper than any other live reviews. Like if you look up human geography tutors, it's like no joke, hundreds of dollars. So, all right, let's see. Question. Is it okay to use a current event when answering this question? So, you just need to, in terms of like answering the question, you need to make sure that you are being really specific to what the question's asking. So this question here, this FRQ is, it's not telling you what countries this is, right? This just says country A, country B. And you can imagine that country A is similar to like Namibia, like we talked about, and that country B is similar to, you know, like the United States, something like that. But they're not giving you actual countries. So you don't have to use current events to answer this. And I'm not sure that you would be able to, because you don't have countries to actually attach to. You could use it in your explanation if you wanted to, right? One positive impact of country A is blank. An example of this would be in Namibia because blank. So you could totally do that. But in terms of this question, current events wouldn't really help you out. For other questions, yeah, you can. I mean, you can talk about any of those things. And a lot of times, getting the points for things will require that you sort of know something about current events, something about history. So hopefully that answers your question. Do they use any other type of graphs or data instead of population data? So on the exam, you're going to see all types of, there's a lot of models in human geography. Population pyramids is one of them. And so there's a lot of other ways that they're going to show you data. Maps is a really popular one. So the chances of you seeing a map in your FRQs is high. You could see some other data organized in some other way. I think you could see even just like population data on like a graph could happen, or in a chart could happen. So you can see any type of like stimulus like that, not just pyramids. All right. Oh, pyramids, what I meant. I'm doing CBR, CDR, and NIR, and I see questions like, if this number is low or high, what does this show you about this country? Yeah, so, okay, so if you haven't studied the demographic transition model yet, CBR is crude birth rate, CDR is crude death rate, and NIR is the natural increase rate. And so just like with pyramids, you can like extrapolate, you can analyze like why these things would exist. So typically for both of these, for birth rates and death rates, really think about things like medicine and education, technology, right? Those like three things can explain like why is there a high birth rate? That would be because you can attribute that to lack of education, because women are more likely to, or I don't know, more likely to have more children the less education they have. That's a pattern. In terms of death rates, right? So like people will live longer in a society with medicine and technology. In a society without that, or with a lack of it, then they are more likely to die, right? Like that, there's so many different diseases, and if you get that disease and you live in an industrialized country, a developed country, then you'd be okay. If you get that disease and you live in a developing nation, then you would be in trouble. And so in terms of CBR, CDR, and the natural increase rate, think of medicine, technology, and education. Okay. I'm going to delete that one. All right, y'all. So I'm going to be back next week. We're going to talk about the DTM. We're going to talk about any last bits of vocab for population. And then after that, we'll go to migration. So if you have any other questions, drop them in the questions inside the question here. And I will hop back in later and make sure that they're all answered. And so, just remember that a lot of human geography is vocab. Oh, you know what? Let me just look at this poll again. What stresses you out the most about AP Human Geography? Note-taking and reading the textbook. Yeah. So I think I'm going to do some special sessions on note-taking for Fiveable members, and maybe even like a study with like a take notes with me kind of thing, like every few weeks, or once a week or something. So because I know that note taking is a big part of APs, and it's one of those skills that like tends to get lost. It's like it's tough, but once you know it, then you're good. Yeah. So like maybe what I'll do is sort of like a human geography, like take notes with me kind of thing. And I'll do that for Fiveable members. And so we can do something where it's most people use like one of the same textbooks. And so I can pull up one of the textbooks and I can show you how I would take notes of it. We can kind of take notes together on an upcoming chapter that you have. And so that's the kind of thing that we do at Fiveable. So you guys ask for things, we do them. We've got teachers in right now 10 different AP subjects, and we're growing. So with that, hit the button that says replays and future live sessions if you want to learn more about what we're doing at Fiveable. So the early bird fall price is going to change on October 1st. So I definitely recommend, $15 for it. I can literally save you $4,000 in college credits. So talk to your parents, hit me up if you have any questions, and let me know, if you have any requests. By the way, any requests for like what we should cover next Sunday? What's your tests on this week? My plan is to talk about the DTM, but I can move faster if you feel like migrations are going to come up sooner, or anything like that. So if there's something specific that you really want me to talk about, like if you have a test this week, what is it about? Excuse me. All right. So drop it in the chat if you have any requests, and I will see y'all later. Whoa. Bye.